Good evening, boys and ghouls. You have tuned into the Killer Countdown, brought to you by Backlot 605. Each week, two horror fanatics rank the best that the horror genre has to offer. Grab your popcorn and your kitchen knife and get ready for the Killer Countdown.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the latest episode of the Killer Countdown. I am your host. I am Casey Kelderman. Join with me remotely is my co-host, Mr. Blake Ginithan.
What's up?
What up?
How are you today?
I'm fine. I'm fine.
About as fine as we can be during this whole thing.
Yeah, and about as good as we can be. Full disclosure, this is the second time that we are recording this episode.
Yes.
First time had lots of technical difficulties.
Yeah, and that falls squarely on my shoulders. So
no,
I apologize.
We're still trying to figure it out. We're still trying to figure out how we're going to continue to do this.
Yeah.
You know, every 2 weeks and doing it remotely. It's just a pain.
Yeah, it really is. It's not our ideal way of doing this. It's just the way we know best right now. So.
Yeah. With that being said, if this is your first time listening, we're sorry because this is not usually how the episodes go. So basically, this episode, we already know how it played out between myself and Blake because we have played the game before. But we're still going to run through our choices in this week's topic, which is horror sequels.
The best horror sequels.
Yeah, so best horror sequels. There will be no dramatic pausing. There will be no deciding in this because we already did that last week.
Yep. So we're just gonna kind of just go through each pick and discuss it about why we love it and why it works for us, and then we'll just kind of move on.
Yeah. There is one piece that we want to start off with before we get into our recent watches and then the game after that. We lost a horror legend this past week.
Mm-hmm.
Stuart Gordon, director of such films as Reanimator, From Beyond. Passed away, unfortunately, this last week. I don't believe it was due to any of the coronavirus stuff. But,
yeah. So far, none of that that's been confirmed. But it sounds like it was just of natural causes. So.
Yeah, but one of those guys that whose name you recognize and you immediately know it's a Stuart Gordon film as soon as you see it. And Blake, I'll let you kick it off because there's one movie you introduced me to earlier last year.
Yeah, yeah. So every year I try and do at least a horror double feature where I play trailers and a couple horror movies. And last year I did Intruder, and then followed by From Beyond, which is my favorite Stuart Gordon movie. And I'll be honest, I have not seen a lot of Stuart Gordon. I'm looking at his credits right now, and I've seen Reanimator, From Beyond, Dolls, Robot Jocks, and Fortress. So I'm not the end all be all person to speak on Stuart Gordon, but I dig for the most part everything I've seen. I definitely need to give Reanimator another viewing. I'm just not connecting with that movie for some reason. But from my understanding, he was a wonderful soul who really championed the little guy, welcomed a lot of lost souls into his cabal of horror lovers. Joe Begos had a wonderful Instagram posts upon Stuart's passing, which I highly recommend everyone check out. That just shows how wonderful Stuart was. But Stuart generally went for broke with his movies, and we love them for that.
Yeah, I'm kind of a Stuart Gordon newbie because I've seen Reanimator, 3-4 times, and I love Reanimator, and of course it's probably his most famous film. And I only recently watched 2 of his other films. One was From Beyond at that double feature that you threw, and such a great film, great use.
Yeah.
He loves reusing cast cast members from previous films, and including Barbara Crampton and Jeffrey Combs. And I love that he likes to work with people that he genuinely admires and trusts. And another one that I do love of his that I just watched last year for the first time was Castle Freak.
Mm-hmm.
A full moon movie, and if you haven't checked that one out, that's kind of an underrated one from the mid 90s. Definitely not what Full Moon has become today with what they were doing in this film. It's an actual movie. That's a big difference between what it was then and what it is now. But he's one of those guys where I'm like, I just need to do a deep dive into his filmography after this.
I have it. Oh, go ahead.
One thing I didn't know about until just recently when I saw his passing was he actually wrote Honey, I Shrunk the Kids for Disney.
Yeah.
Which is a movie I grew up on and loved, and I can definitely see the Stuart Gordon parts of that movie.
Yeah. I have not seen it for a while, but you can definitely tell that movie kind of came from like a mad scientist filmmaker.
Yeah.
But if I as far as Stuart Gordon movies that if like I wouldn't say like movies of his that fly under the radar, because I feel like the majority of his movies have flown under the radar. But if I were to pinpoint one that people should check out, I'd definitely say Fortress, which is not a horror movie by any means, but it's a really fine piece of genre filmmaking. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, unfortunately, we had the great passing of the great Stuart Gordon, and that's just I'm glad that we could actually bring up and talk about his movies yet, because that's I think that's a very important thing to do whenever a filmmaker, especially one that has kind of flown under the radar, that you can bring them up and discuss their films and go back and revisit some that you haven't seen before.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's move on to our recent watches. So the first time we recorded this, we didn't have too many. I added quite a few more to my list. I don't know about you, Blake.
I added one.
Okay. So I don't know. I'll kick it off with one that I had. One of the ones I had watched during this was Don't Go in the Woods Alone.
Is the alone part at the actual end in the title?
Yeah. Yeah. It's Don't Go in the Woods ... Alone.
It has the ellipses in there. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
it's great. This movie was recommended to our good buddy Corey Jacobs in Somewhat Random Movie Collection. Go check him out on Instagram. He had mentioned this on the first episode that we ever had him on, which you were also a part of, which was the best worst movies.
That was a lot of fun.
That was a very fun episode. Go check that on the Backlot main feed from last summer, roughly.
I feel like that was like a June, July episode.
Yeah, early summer episode of that. Yeah. But yeah, he had mentioned this movie, and I was like, yeah, this sounds like a movie I'd be into, and picked it up on a Blu-ray sale. I don't remember which company it was. I know I said it on the last episode. I don't remember now. But anyway, picked up the Blu-ray on it. This movie is poorly shot, poorly edited, poorly acted, everything is so bad about this movie, but it's so great. And it's a perfect party movie. So if you're just looking for a bad slasher movie just to have a few beers with your buddies, or maybe if you guys want to throw, I mean, you can't do that now, but if you guys want to like have a Zoom meeting like what we're using right now and watch Don't Go in the Woods Alone, this would be a perfect movie to get the buddies together and watch it.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. The other one that I had from that episode was Southbound.
Yes.
So I'll briefly touch on it. I know we talked about it on that episode. Southbound, found footage movie. Basically, it's from.
No, it's not.
Well, anthology.
It's an anthology, yeah.
Yes, but it's from the people that did the found footage anthology movie VHS. So one is
right.
Very most of the same crew from that did this, including the Radio Silence guys, who are kind of exploding here in the last year. And I mean, they just did Ready or Not last year, doing Scream 5 I'm assuming next year, maybe, depending on how things are going.
Boy, I don't know at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, it's nice to see that these guys are getting recognized. And Southbound is, I think it's pretty much on par with the two VHS movies. Like I had mentioned, my favorite segment from the movie was the I don't even remember what it's called. The segment where the guy is bringing this girl to a hospital, and it takes place on the way to the hospital and inside the hospital.
Yeah. I think that's the like consensus
Yeah.
best part of the film.
Do you want to keep? I'll push it off to you. I'll let you throw out a couple that you had in.
Well, the one movie that I watched more like a month ago, but I just keep forgetting to mention was Richard Stanley's debut feature, Hardware, which is just an incredible post-apocalyptic Mad Max, Blade Runner, cyborg slasher movie about a guy who finds a robot head in the desert and he brings it home as a gift for his girlfriend in her apartment. It rewires itself and creates a body for itself and ends up going on this big killing spree. And you could tell it was like made for not like a tiny amount of money, but it's essentially like a one setting movie with a few exterior scenes, but for the most part it takes place in this one apartment. And man, it takes a little bit to get going, but once it does, man, it's just brutal gore movie. And has like a really good soundtrack with like Public Image Limited has a song that kind of like is like almost like the theme of the movie. Is it Dylan McDermott is the boyfriend, like an early 90s Dylan McDermott before he kind of went on to become this big TV actor. There's a great sequence that it kind of harks out of Rear Window with this perverted, disgusting guy or a neighbor who's watching McDermott's girlfriend through the window, and he bites it later on, so he kind of gets his due justice. But yeah, it's just like this weird like cyberpunk horror movie that like, man, people just don't talk about. And yes, it's a very good effort, and I would recommend it. People check it out.
Like I had mentioned, I've never seen Hardware, but I heard about it on an episode of the Office, so it's been on my watch list for
you did mention that. And then I still want to see his follow-up to that, which is Dust Devil, which I just can't seem to find. But the other movie that I actually watched last night, was John Flynn's Brain Scan from 1994. Like the early 90s were kind of like this. There's like a blow up of these like arcade or video game or virtual reality type horror movies. Lawnmower Man is one that came out. Another movie called Arcade that wasn't great and was kind of looked over. But Brain Scan is this movie about this teenager played by Edward Furlong who sort of like screams and flails his way through another movie.
So every Eddie Furlong performance.
I don't mean to like talk trash on him, but he's not the greatest actor.
But
he
like
plays
Edward Furlong.
Yeah, I do too. He plays this teenager who sort of like has his room up in the attic, and he's. So I was watching these sequences in his room. And he's got like a home theater stereo system, a TV, like this computer set up. He's got this cool system that sort of like rigs his phone to an automated machine that's on his computer screen that he can dial phone numbers. And my first thought was like, how does he afford all this stuff? But a buddy of his is looking in Fangoria magazine, who rings him up one day and says, "Hey, there's this game you got to check out called Brain Scan, and it's supposed to be the most terrifying thing, the newest terrifying experience in video gaming." And so Furlong calls his phone number, and without even doing anything, like it's like, "All right, you're getting the game." And it hangs up, and Furlong calls back, and the number is disconnected. of course. And a few days later, he gets the brain scan in the mail, and he puts it into his gaming console, and all of a sudden, like he kind of like falls into like this mini coma, like this trance, and all of a sudden he sees like this first person experience of someone committing a murder, and he feels all the feelings, and he has all of like the rush that you would get if you were actually doing it. And then he wakes up, and it turns out that what he experienced actually happened. It wasn't a part of the video game. And then he keeps going into like these trances, and things keep happening where people get murdered, or he has to like do these new levels. So he keeps getting these new discs in the mail. And soon enough, this character named Trickster, who looks like a coked out like demon version of, gosh, I don't even know, like maybe like Stanley Tucci from the Hunger Games series. like he comes out like a more coked out version of Stanley Tucci from Hunger Games, like comes out of his game and tells him that he has to continue, otherwise he could die. And so like it's like this mid-90s low budget take on how technology is taking over our lives. And there's a great sequence at the end of the movie where Furlong destroys a bunch of his computer and all this stuff. But like I thought it was kind of like this allegory for how technology is taking over our lives and quite can't give us the same satisfaction as real life interaction. And I thought that was kind of like way ahead of its time in terms of what we're going through now, how our phones are kind of replacing our lives and how we seek satisfaction. But has like a really cool like 90s metal rock soundtrack, which I can see now why Brian's really into it. And that's no slight on Brian. I get why he likes it, because there's a lot of really great music in it.
Yeah, he's a soundtrack guy.
Yeah, he is, and that's totally cool. But yeah, I think the movie like slightly loses me like around the 50-minute mark, but like it ends strong. And Frank Langella plays the detective who's investigating everything and starting to figure things out. And yeah, I really dug this movie a lot, and I recommend it to people who have not seen it. There's a great Blu-ray disc of it out, and you can rent. I rented it on Amazon, and man, it sounded and looked really, really good.
Would you say Brain Scan and Hardware would make a fun double feature?
Yeah. Yes, I would.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry. I was trying to, I lost my train of thought. Yes. Otherwise, Upgrade would be a really good double feature with that as well.
Yeah, I got a few more that we haven't talked about from the previous episode, but I'll bring them up here. One of those I'll wait to talk about till I finish the rest of the series. I just watched Hatchet 2. I'll work my way through the rest of the series, and then we'll talk about the Hatchet series.
Yeah.
Had you've seen them all, right?
I've seen them all except the newest one, which I think is just called Victor Crowley.
Yeah, Victor Crowley, yeah.
I watched the trailer. I'm not in a rush to go watch it after watching the trailer, but I ride hard for 2 and 3. So
okay. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and I'll finish the series, then we'll talk about it.
Very cool. Yeah.
But yeah, some of the other ones that I watched, I'll briefly bring this one up just because it's a guilty pleasure of mine. I watched the movie Demon House, starring and directed by Zach Baggins from Ghost Adventures fame. If you're into the Ghost Adventures type of shows and the melodramatic take on ghost hunting that Zach Baggins brings to the table, this is the movie for you. I mean, it's a hour and 50-minute long episode of Ghost Adventures. That's all it is.
Did you say 50 as in 50?
Hour 50.
Oof.
It's long.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a long one. Yeah, I knew about this story since the day he bought this house. And I've been waiting for this movie to come out. And yeah, it's on Prime right now. So if you're into that type of thing, go check it out, Demon House. But there is 2 other ones that I want to talk about more because I know you've seen both of these.
Oh, okay.
All right. The first one, Demons 2,
Yes.
directed by Lamberto Bava. I had watched Demons, I don't know, probably last October, I think I watched Demons for the first time. And I
Yeah.
know you love Demons.
Yes, I adore Demons. It's becoming not just maybe one of my favorite movies of the '80s or horror movies of the '80s, but just one of my favorite horror movies. Period.
Yeah, the
I
movie.
I watch it yearly, and it's got everything. Like it's got a great soundtrack. It's got I love the idea of being trapped in a theater, and
Perfect
the
setting
movie,
for a horror movie.
right? The movie coming to life. I love. There's a particular sequence where someone is doing cocaine in a specific way with a certain song, and it's just the way that whole sequence is handled is so great. And honestly, like there are shots in the movie that are like legit, very well lit, staged shots. I'm thinking of one where the zombies are like climbing steps and they're lit up from behind and their eyes are lit up, and it's just like, why are more horror movies not trying things like this? But yeah, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent. I love Demons, and another movie I would highly recommend to anybody who is looking for something that maybe doesn't pop out of lists, like say Nightmare on Elm Street or the Jason movies.
I'm right there with you. I only watched Demons the one time so far, but I'm like, this like I'm constantly looking for movies to add to the October rotation.
Yeah.
Demons is that now. But Demons 2 it's fun. It's not as good as the first one, which
So I actually liked Demons 2 more than Demons for like a year, and then I rewatched Demons and I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking with that. It's not as good. It's fun.
It's fun.
It's I love the idea of this high rise being infested with like the same idea of what's happening, but there's some stuff that just doesn't really work for me in hindsight.
Just like the first Demons uses the movie theater setting perfectly, this uses a high-rise apartment and uses every part of that.
Yeah.
It uses the first level gym, it uses the underground parking ramp, it uses the single person's apartment buildings, it uses the elevator shaft, it uses the roof. It literally uses every part.
Yeah.
The stairwells, it uses every part of this apartment building.
There's some generally scary sequences in the movie too.
Yeah, I think
it was.
Oh, go ahead.
No, that's all I had to say.
Two scenes that stick out to me, and it's because it kind of harkens back to a scene you had mentioned from the first Demons, where the demons are running and they're backlit and their eyes are all yellow. There's two shots, and there's one from like the top of this stairwell looking down, which I think is very much like the first film. And then there is a shot where in their parking ramp and all the demons come around this corner. And there's just like this layer of fog behind them. I'm like, God,
that sequence is incredible. And I think Dario Argento's daughter is in that parking garage sequence.
Yes. Yep.
She watches like her dad get mauled to death by demons, which is of course like an awesome little thing they threw in.
Yeah. What's her name? Asia Argento?
Azia, I believe is how you pronounce it.
Either way, it's spelled Asia.
Yeah.
Either way, yeah, she's the little girl in that scene.
Yeah.
I
mean, Demons 2 is fun. I would say if you're gonna do like a double feature of the two, I would actually watch Demons 2 first and then finish with Demons. Maybe like Demons feels like the ending of what's happening, and Demons 2 just seems like oh hey, we had a really good idea, let's kind of spin it off. But maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Like Demons feels more apocalyptic.
The crazy thing to me, is that the ending of Demons sets up for a sequel, and they kind of don't capitalize it on Demons 2, which has nothing to do with the first film, really.
Yeah, even though they even go as far as like recasting actors.
Yeah, I think the first film is very apocalyptic, especially that final scene where you're like, oh shit, this is gonna take over the entire world, and then get to Demons 2, and it's like, none of that happened. So I think if you watch Demons 2 and then Demons 1, that might be the best way to go.
Yeah, I showed Demons 2 to some friends. I for one of my double features, and I played The Blob right after. It was Demons 2 and then The Blob, and then it brought the house down.
All right. The last one I had on here was a little film called The Exorcist. Have you ever heard of this film?
I've actually not gotten a chance to see this one yet.
Yeah, The Exorcist. It's not a very good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
According to one of your friends, it's not.
Yeah.
Or your future sister-in-law, is that who it was?
Yeah. So this past, it'll be a week now by the time this episode comes out. But on Shudder is putting out this new series called Cursed Films. So basically, it's a 5-part mini series, and each episode will follow a film that has a curse upon it. You know, actors dying while filming, people related to the actors that have died during it, and things happening on set. And of course, one of the most infamous ones is The Exorcist.
Yep.
So Shudder had a pretty fun night where they showed the first episode of that series on The Exorcist, and showing how it influenced things in real life and how some things were fabricated by the PR to boost the publicity for the movie. And then right after that, they played The Exorcist, the theatrical version, which I don't think I've ever actually seen the theatrical version. I've only ever seen the unrated director's cut, which is the way to watch it.
I think I've only seen the director's cut. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah, it's The Exorcist. Like, it's one of the greatest horror movies ever made.
Yeah.
I still think it's one of the scariest ones ever made, because of the things it sets up, and its very slow-paced first act, which there's a very big difference between slow-paced and boring, and this movie is just not boring.
No, it's not boring. It's just like, I think if your expectations are this is the scariest movie I've ever made, you might find the opening hour like, well, what, like who
why are we in the desert?
Right. Like, and then, you know, all the drama with the acting and the director, and then, I'm sorry, the movie that she's shooting,
Mm-hmm.
and of course all the like party sequences, and then the hospital stuff. Yeah, I mean, it definitely takes a little bit to get there, but I think all of that it's obviously deliberate to get you invested in what's happening, and you want to watch this girl who's a sweetheart, you know, like go from a nice 12, 13-year-old into someone who's possessed. So yeah, I mean, I watched it last October for my horror watch, and I've seen it probably 3 or 4 times, and I watch it like every 5 years, and I mean, it terrified me. I'm 36 years old, and it terrified me. You know, like you know, I think any movie that can use like I'm not a religious person, but someone who comes to me and says, you know, like, I believe in this and this, and then I believe that they believe, and to watch someone who's lost, sort of like on the cusp of losing their faith, and then having to go through this, and then having to fight those demons literally and figuratively, like that scares me, you know. And William Friedkin, for my money, is one of the best directors of all time, and this is one of his best, and he's so good at conveying just that grittiness and the life and death situation of the story.
Yeah, it's like I can't really describe The Exorcist because it's The Exorcist. But the first time I watched it was in high school, and I went in under the impression, okay, it's The Exorcist, scariest movie ever made. And yeah, I mean, the first time I watched it, I'm like, okay, we're going a little slow paced here, and time to pick it up. And then there's the great shot in this movie, and the blink and you miss it shot of Karis like running through the streets, and there's just the quick jump cut to the Pazuzu face, and you're like, wait, what was that? Go back, like, what was that? And it's never brought up, never really mentioned after that until it pops up again in the third and final act of the film. And from that moment, the first time I watched it, I'm like, okay, I'm hooked. What's going on? What's going to happen next? And I think that there's many ways to watch The Exorcist, whether you're religious or not, or whether it alters your beliefs or not. And funnily enough, the Catholic Church very much pushes this movie forward. They promote this movie quite a bit because of how much there is of this man coming back to faith, and the way you can see it happening through those lenses. But yeah, and then right after that, Shudder played The Exorcist 3, which I had just watched the week prior, so I watched like the first 10 minutes again. And
Nice.
so yeah, but we'll talk about that perhaps later.
Yeah, we'll see if that gets played or not.
We'll see. All right, so let's jump into our list here. So usually how this works is me and Blake will, this last time I offered Blake the number 1 spot on the list because he came up with the idea for this topic. So basically what we do is alternate picks. I had the even numbers. Blake had the odd numbers. We did the top 12 this time because we're like, 8 is just not big enough. 10 is not even big enough. Let's do 12.
Yeah, 6 picks each. Boy, it was even still hard to choose between. I mean, people won't get to hear it, but I mean, like whenever it was my turn, I didn't even know what to play. I sort of like winged it based upon like where I think certain movies should land. And looking at the list right in front of me right now, like there's one that I'm certain, maybe even 2 that might have been played too high, but I'm certainly not going to change my answers now. So
no, we can't.
Yeah,
this is
we
locked
can't.
in stone.
It is.
There is, yeah. We'll talk about some of our discards at the end, but let's jump into this. This is the Killer Countdown, best horror sequels of all time. So I had the number 12 pick, and I chose Friday the 13th, Part 6. Jason Lives. So Friday the 13th, Part 6, my favorite of the Friday the 13th movies. That is why it landed its spot on the list. And one of the rules I made for myself going into this list, and we followed it. We did follow it for the most part.
Yeah. Well, it was your rule, so I didn't really need to follow it. But I sort of agree with you that we should have had 1 movie per series. Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we decided. We weren't going to allow like 3 Friday the 13ths on here and 2 Nightmare on Elm Streets. No, one from each series was going to make the list, if any, out of the series. So yeah, this is my favorite of the Friday the 13th movies. Landed number 1 on our top in our first episode of the Friday the 13th series ranking. But yeah, this is the film where Jason pretty much enters zombie Jason. It opens with a great opening. Harkening back to the Universal Monsters, where Tommy Jarvis is convinced that Jason is not dead, so he goes with a buddy, digs up Jason's body to try to get rid of it any way he can, and in doing so, he takes this giant metal rod, shoves it through Jason's heart. It gets struck by lightning. Jason is awoken and risen as a zombified Frankenstein's monster. Jason kills off Tommy's buddy. Tommy takes off. And we get the great opening where it is very much a James Bond-esque opening where Jason slashes towards the camera and the blood drips in front of it. I love Friday the 13th Part 6. It's my favorite. And one of the main reasons is there is a comedy beat to it. It's not fully meta, but it knows exactly what it is. And another standout for this movie is all of them are set at a camp, and by God, this time they actually have kids at the camp.
Yeah, and they used that plot point well.
And it actually creates some real scares in this movie that I don't think were present in any of the previous films, really.
Yeah. During my binge last year, this was one of them that stood out to me that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, so that is Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives.
So I had the number 11 pick. I sort of threw this in there as a curveball because I think this movie deserves a little bit more love than it kind of initially got. But I went with Scream 4. And I'm an unabashed fan of every movie in this series. Even Scream 3, I think, is a lot of fun, even if it sort of kind of dips into some murky waters with what it's trying to do. But I loved Scream 2 for the longest time. But Scream 4 it's sort of like becoming prophetic in a way, with how people nowadays in real life are starting to record violent acts and murders that they commit, and Scream 4 just sort of like saw that coming almost a decade ago. And I think in terms of the series itself, it's the best sequel. Scream 2 fanatics might disagree with me on that. And I love Scream 2, don't get me wrong, but Scream 4 just seems to really get where things are going with reality. And there's a lot of great sequences in this movie. The sequence where all the kids gather at a barn to watch the Stab series. And then, of course, the final sequence where we find out who the killers are. And I think in terms of what the series brings with the really quick, rapid dialogue, self-referential dialogue, I think the actors who are in this really bring their A game. They understand what the series was doing before. Emma Roberts is particularly great. The Culkin, I forget which Culkin it is really good in this movie.
Hayden Panettiere is the
Hayden
standout in this movie, man.
Is like Hayden Panettiere is like my dream girl in this movie. She is just something to look at, and then also just knows her, like, to hear like a beautiful woman speak about horror movies with such loving fashion is always nice. Scream 4 is a really, really solid sequel, and I hope it gets the love at some point because it deserves it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, giving the love to Scream 4. It's my favorite of the Scream sequels. I've probably seen Scream 2 more than this.
I think I've seen Scream 2 more than any of the Scream movies, honestly.
That's probably like the easiest one to watch and kind of the straightforward slasher out of them all. But Scream 4, like, I'll echo everything that you said, and I'll add that it also is very meta in the aspect of this movie is about remakes and reboots, while being a continuation. So like this is like Halloween Kills before Halloween Kills came out 8 years later or whatever. Way ahead of its time, much like the first Scream was. And I'm still waiting for this movie to really catch on with people. Like,
so it was on Netflix. That's how I watched it recently. So if it's still there, I would highly recommend folks check it out.
Yeah, and again, the cast is fantastic. I love the multiple stab openings in the beginning of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Funnily enough, I just pulled up the IMDb quick. Apparently, Matthew Lillard has an uncredited cameo in this movie.
Interesting.
He is at the Stabathon party in the barn.
Okay, I'll have to rewatch the movie again because I did not know that. Which means he's probably not even visible.
Does Stu live? That is the question.
Interesting.
Is he pulling strings this entire time?
Well, maybe we'll find out in Scream 5.
I would be all for it because that was one of the original endings that they had for Scream 3 was that he was going to come back. And then everything with the writers stuff happened in that one. But anyway, Scream 4. I'm into it. I dig it. I love the movie.
Yeah, awesome.
All right. So number 10 then. I think I threw the first wrinkle into this whole list with this pick.
Yeah, I feel like this is the second time this movie has surprised me on a list.
So the number 10 pick on the top horror sequels, I went with 2019's Dr. Sleep. So Dr. Sleep topped our list of the best horror films of 2019, and rightfully so in my eyes. I love this film. I think it is a perfect mashup of the King story along with the Kubrick film and the insurmountable task that Mike Flanagan had in combining the two, where of course everybody knows the story that Stephen King hates the Shining film, and Kubrick could probably give a damn of his thoughts at that point. But yeah, I think it does everything right in this film. So basically, this follows the adult Danny Torrance, now played by Ewan McGregor. And he is this recovering alcoholic. He is trying to use his shine in a way to better people. He works at a this like retirement facility. This I don't know what would you call that he works at, this hospital.
I guess I thought it was a hospice.
And basically,
facility.
he realized that he can sense when people are about to pass, and he kind of gives them their final vows, and gives them someone to just to talk to while they're in their final moments. And it's really great stuff there in the opening. And he becomes intertwined with this young girl who has similar shining powers. As she becomes unraveled with this shining vampire cult led by the great Rebecca Ferguson as Rose the Hat, and he must team up with this young girl to evade this strange vampire mist sucking cult. And yeah, I think all the performances are very strong. Rebecca Ferguson, I think, is the standout of this film, and I know you agree with that too. And Mike Flanagan, I looking at it now and everything he's put out previously before Dr. Sleep, I have probably no problem saying he is my favorite horror director currently working today. In my eyes, he's done no wrong. I don't even know what I would classify as his worst film, but I've enjoyed immensely each film that he's done. I think Haunting a Hill House is still his magnum opus, his masterpiece, but Dr. Sleep for it is right behind it for me.
Yeah, I think this movie will get its due in 5 to 10 years.
Much like The Shining.
Right. Yeah. So I didn't love Dr. Sleep. I think I admired it more than anything. I love its ambition to not, and it's not like a big movie or anything. It's just Flanagan takes his time telling the story. I watched the director's cut, so I got all the chapter breaks, which I really, really enjoyed. Yeah, there's something that I'm not connecting with his movies, and Dr. Sleep is another one. I feel like in that allotted time of 5 to 10 years, I'll admire Flanagan more than I do now. Yeah, man, I really enjoy a lot of this movie. I loved Rebecca Ferguson. I thought she should have gotten an Oscar nomination if that was even, a possibility with genre films. This is Ewan McGregor's best movie his best performance. I've always liked Ewan McGregor, but I've never been bowled over by anything he's done. And I thought he was just an excellent choice to play a grown-up Danny Torrance. I love the ending where it kind of gives the Shining fans what they kind of want in a way, with kind of not maybe spoon feeding a.
Hey, look, you remember this?
Right. Maybe the elevator sequence was a little fan servicey, but
there's one thing I really, really appreciate about this movie is that the Shining specific, the Overlook stuff, the ghosts, everything like that, the stuff you remember from The Shining, isn't until the third act.
Yeah.
He makes you work for it.
Yeah,
you got to actually dig the characters that you're with this time around, and then at the end he'll give you all the Shining stuff.
Yeah, and there's there's a lot of great sequences. I'm one involving a young baseball player. There's a great sequence in a movie theater. I need to watch this again for sure. Dr. Sleep.
Dr. Sleep, yes. So that was our number 10 on this list.
Oof. All right. Well, with the number 9 choice, I went with The Devil's Rejects, which I think is either the best Rob Zombie movie or it's his second best. I don't really know for sure, but
well, according to our list. I think we had, so I'm going to pull it up quick. I believe it was our fourth on there.
Well, sometimes decisions are made in hasty fashion. But The Devil's Rejects is a unique horror movie where it's not quite like a flat out horror movie. It just contains horrific imagery and
Terrible people.
terrible people. So The Devil's Rejects is a sequel to House of a Thousand Corpses, which I think is still a strong effort from Rob Zombie. It's his debut movie. What I love about The Devil's Rejects is it doesn't just do the same thing over again. House of a Thousand Corpses is like this Texas Chainsaw Massacre ripoff, and it sort of takes the same characters that are in the first one and sort of throws them into like this like 1970s trashy road movie. And I mean trashy with all due respect, because
It's trashy.
It's a very trashy, disgusting, grimy, slutty movie. I think at the time it came out, it had like the most F words ever uttered in a movie. I think like 470 or 480. But we find I don't want to call them heroes, but we find our main characters, the Firefly family, on the run from the police, and they have taken some hostages. And it's just like this 2-hour descent into almost literal hell. Bill Moseley just lights up the movie with these. He has these monologues where like he's on fire with what he's saying, and we talked about it earlier, but like Bill Moseley, like this is award worthy performance from him, and it's a shame that the Academy doesn't recognize these performances in these genre movies, because he's up there. This is up there with one of the best performances of its decade, which was the aughts. But and this whole like spiral into madness ends with one of the great endings of not just horror movies, but maybe just movies in general, where the outro for, well, actually not even the outro, it's almost the entire song of Freebird by Leonard Skinner plays while the Firefly family drives into a police barricade and they, spoilers, get shot to death. Well, I guess they don't. But yeah, it's just like this incredible ending to such a intense and disgusting movie. And I mean all these words with due respect, because that's the point that Zombie is trying to get across, is that this is just an ugly movie with ugly characters, but it's all done with such a love to what's being shown, and that's credit to Rob Zombie's writing and directing.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. This was the movie where I finally said to myself, I get it now with Rob Zombie. I get why people like this guy and why people want to see his films. And yeah, everything you said is right. Bill Moseley, he crushes in this movie. He's so good.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I just thought of right now with Bill Moseley is, with all the monologues he goes through and even his look, how did he never play Charles Manson in a movie?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, he could still do it now, honestly.
He could, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
mean,
That's a great question.
Mr. Rob Zombie, please get on that. I mean, a Rob Zombie directed Bill Moseley Charles Manson movie.
Yeah, oof. I don't think I'd want to see that, but now that you say that, like, there's some sequences in this that might be as close to a Rob Zombie Marilyn Manson movie that we would probably get.
Yeah, but yeah, again, Bill Moseley crushes in this movie.
Yeah,
this is one of my favorite Rob Zombie movies, easily top 2 or 3 for me. And yeah, I it's the perfect. It is Zombie finally realizing what he was trying to accomplish and has been trying to accomplish after this movie too.
Yeah.
Because Zombie, you can tell when it's a Rob Zombie movie. He has a certain aesthetic to it. He's going for that 70s grindhouse type of film. It didn't fully work in House of a Thousand Corpses for me. It didn't work in the Halloween movies or 31. Lords of Salem is a very different type of movie and wasn't going for that aesthetic. But this is the one where it finally sticks and stands out and works.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was all for that. That was also on my list of possible films for this list. So Devil's Rejects. But my pick for number 8 segued off this to another Bill Moseley film, and that is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. So Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 follows this sheriff in Texas who's he was the uncle to two of the I don't know, they were high school, college age kids in the first Texas Chainsaw that were killed by Leatherface and his family, and basically he's on the hunt to stop the cannibal family, and this also has introduces the great character of Stretch, the radio DJ, played by Caroline Williams, who has become the new target for this family. And what I love about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is how much Tobe Hooper ratchets up the comedy in this. Because he's always said that the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a comedy, and I'm like, nah, well, no, it's not really, but I see what you're.
There's some humor in it.
There's some humor in it, but not like this. This is a comedy.
It's
I think he was going. He's like, people, don't you get what I was going for in the first movie? So ratchets up to 100 in this movie, and again, I think Bill Moseley is the standout in this movie as Chop Top. He's one of my favorite horror characters ever. All the little idiosyncrasies that he gives to the character and all the little character choices that he adds to it is really fun. And I mean, Texas Chainsaw is one of the movies that made him want to become an actor in the first place. So it's very cool to see him in the film, in the follow-up. And Dennis Hopper is great in this movie. Double wielding chainsaws will never not be great.
Yeah, I had this on my list as well, or in my list of movies to play, and you essentially just beat me to playing it, which is fine. This movie came out in 1986. Dennis Hopper had like a big comeback year with this. He had this, Hoosiers, and David Lynch's Blue Velvet all in 1 year, and it was sort of his return to acting after trying to go straight after all the drug abuse he did in the 70s and early 80s. And so what a movie, and what a year for him to come back to. He's great in this. He plays just this insane. If you had known that he had gotten sober before doing this, you would have thought that he was just riding high with all the drug use he was doing in this, because he plays a pretty wild character. I love the last 30 minutes where they're in this disgusting hellhole where the family lives now. And
definitely an influence on House of a Thousand Corpses for Rob Zombie.
Yeah, it's a good point. I admire the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, its place in horror history, but I'll be honest, I'd rather watch this one than the first one. This is just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I should probably bring up that what I said on that previous recording of this. I do think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is better than the first one.
I don't think I'll go that far, but
and I love the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah,
this one I think improves of everything that Tobe Hooper was trying to do. I know I'm definitely in the minority of that.
You are in the way far minority with that, but that's okay.
Sitting on my Bill Moseley Chop Top Island all by myself. All right. Number 7.
I went with 28 Weeks Later, which is the sequel to 28 Days Later, which is a phenomenal zombie infection movie. 28 Days Later came out of nowhere in 2003. Sort of set the horror world alit, because there really hadn't been a good zombie movie, probably since Day of the Dead, maybe in '85. Maybe there's one in there I'm missing, but
did the 90s have any good zombie movies?
I don't know.
I'll look it up while you're talking.
You look it up. Yeah. So 28 Days Later came out of nowhere. A legit instant classic, shot on TV cameras that give like this really grainy, realistic feel to it. It's still terrifying to this day. A sequel is announced, more Hollywood version of the story. Stars Jeremy Renner as this U.S. soldier. In London, the U.S. Army is helping repopulate London after getting the infection under control. Robert Carlyle from Trainspotting plays a father of two kids who were a part of this initial repopulation, reintegration, and his wife might be like the cure for this infection, might not be. It turns out that she bites one of the doctors, which creates a new infection. And this London is now reinfected with the virus, and all hell breaks loose, of course. What I love about 28 Days Later, and the debate of whether it's as good or better than the first one is not for me to say. I like it better than the first one. It doesn't have the impact of the first one, but what I love about 28 Weeks Later is that it does a couple of things. One, it came out as sort of like maybe not the height of the US's war in Afghanistan and Iraq, but maybe like at the point where people were just like really sick of hearing about it, seeing about it, and wondering why we were still there. And spoilers for people, we're still there. But so it was like the perfect allegory for the US's involvement in that war, where it was the US Army in a foreign land and just did not have a control or a grasp on what was happening. And that's what I love about horror movies in general, and the genre itself, is that it's the perfect genre to sort of criticize politics or society without being overtly political. You know, like we're able to get ideas out and messages out without being too heavy-handed, and that's what 28 Weeks Later does so well. 28 Weeks Later is also a movie that once it hits a certain moment in the movie, the intensity just ratchets up and does not let up until the credits roll. And it's so rare for a movie to just get better and better and better and better with each sequence. And I feel like the last 45 minutes of the movie is just one incredibly intense sequence after another, where you don't get any break to kind of catch your breath. And it's very rare for movies to do that. And 28 Weeks Later just does it so effortlessly. And I love this movie dearly. And it's another movie that I just don't think gets the love that it deserves. And I want people to know that this is a sequel that, in my opinion, it at least equals the original. Maybe not in terms of its impact on the genre, but just in terms of how good its story is.
I have not seen 28 Days or Weeks since high school, so it's been almost 10 years since I've watched these movies, so I don't have much to say on them, but I really enjoyed both when I watched them, and of course 28 Days. I would say, I mean, if we're talking most influential, like just zombie movies ever, I think
it's top 5, right? It's got to be.
I would say it's top 3 besides 2 Romero movies before that.
Yeah.
Just because of how, like, if Romero invented the modern day zombie, 28 Days Later literally reinvigorated it and brought it back to life. And you wouldn't have Walking Dead and everything that's come because of that.
No, yeah,
without
you would not have that at all. Nope.
I looked up our 90s zombie list. I would say there's only one on here, Dead Alive, and that was 92.
Yeah, it's a very good movie, but the impact it had at the time. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
We should. That would be a fun countdown to do best '90s zombie movies because there is
Boy,
none.
yeah.
Yeah. So that was what? So that was number 7. All right. So number 6. Then I had this choice. This was a first time watch for me in prep for this, and it's a movie I'd heard plenty of things about leading up to it, and of course we had mentioned it earlier on the show. That is 1990's The Exorcist 3. So The
Yeah.
Exorcist 3, written, directed by William Peter Blatty, who wrote the original screenplay and novel of The Exorcist, stepping into the director's chair here. And yeah, this movie, it pretty much ignores everything from Exorcist 2, which I don't remember if I've even seen that film. I've heard it's not great.
I have not seen it either, so.
But yeah, this one is great. It is a perfect follow-up. It's a very similar tone. And I mean, we talked about it. 1990 movies were in a different place then. We had just gone through the slasher craze of the 80s, and to see a movie harken back to the 70s style horror film is a really nice refresher during that time. And basically, this follows a police lieutenant who is investigating this series of murders that lead him to this guy that they call the Gemini Killer, who was believed to be deceased long ago, and it leads him to question this man that is imprisoned, who refers to himself as the Gemini Man, played by the great Brad Dourif in this film. What really stands out in this movie for me is the directing by William Peter Blatty. There are so many great suspenseful sequences in this film. Obviously, the one that sticks out, I think, in everyone's mind that has seen this movie is the hallway scene involving a nurse and a giant scissors. That is probably the most iconic scene from this movie. But besides that, I think it's filled with really great performances. George C. Scott is really good in this movie. The big standout, and the one where, again, we talked about it in previous films on this list, where if the Academy would give genre films more recognition, this would be an Oscar-nominated performance from Brad Dourif in this film. He is so good in this movie, and the way he can switch from one voice that he's doing an inflection to the next with just so seamlessly, and that also goes to the fantastic editing of this film, where they do switch while they are interviewing him in prison. They're switching from Brad Dourif's Gemini Killer character to Jason Miller, who was Karras in the original Exorcist, switching between the two as though it is the demon doing this. And of course, the demon is the Legion demon, for those who know the biblical story of that, and how terrifying that actually is, and how it can encompass multiple people's bodies in different ways. And again, another standout scene for me is involving a woman in this, I believe she's in a mental hospital, and she ends up on the ceiling, and I'm like, yep, no, I don't do crawling things, especially old people crawling creeps me out, and let alone an old lady crawling on the ceiling. That just it gave me the chills. And that's the first thing I said after watching The Exorcist 3. I had not been scared by a movie in a very long time, and this movie did it.
Yeah, this movie has sort of found its audience within the past year or so, and I've seen it once, and it was about 3 to 4 years ago, and it really terrified me. It's a super creepy movie, like you said, filled with great performances. George C. Scott is just it's great to see like this big Hollywood actor taking the genre seriously. He did this and The Changeling, which he's also very, very good in. Like you said, Brad Dourif just gives a mountain of a performance. The sequence you talked about with the hallway, where it just builds, and like seemingly nothing happens, and out of nowhere that happens.
What I love
So,
about that scene is, so it's just the single shot down the hallway, and it follows this nurse in and out of rooms and stuff. And she hears this noise coming close to the camera in one of the rooms, and she goes. The camera cuts to inside the room, and I can't remember. It's something pops out or falls down, and you're like, okay, that's the release, and you're like, all right, that was the jump scare. Scenes like that's it. That was the build up and the payoff right there. And it cuts back to that shot down the hallway, and maybe 30 seconds later she walks in a room and then out the room, and then the actual jump scare happens.
Yeah.
After you've already been released of the tension, it hits you again, like it's like a second jolt to your heart.
Yeah. I think that's the greatest jump scare ever created for a movie.
It's masterful.
My only regret with this movie is that it's not higher on the list. But
yeah, we'll talk about that. I'm looking at this list and I didn't realize it till now. We have some things so out of order, but that's
yeah. But this is a great movie, and people should maybe look beyond like the idea of sequels to very great movies not being good, because this is a very solid follow-up to the original. And like I haven't seen Exorcist 2, but from everything I've heard, it's it's in the stay away zone. Mm-hmm. So I would skip that one and maybe watch if you ever get curious some night. But this Exorcist 3 it's a terrific horror movie.
Well, yeah, and to me, what makes sense for Exorcist 3 is you're not following Reagan.
No,
like her story's done. Like you get it. That was it. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Let's follow the police that were a part of the Exorcist or the priest.
Yeah.
And that just makes sense to me. So yeah.
Yep.
Exorcist 3, number 6.
Great pick. Okay, number 5. I went with Paranormal Activity 3, which for me is the best movie in that series. I do think the first one's very good. It came out of nowhere. And it like the first Paranormal Activity was kind of like the movie that captured the zeitgeist of like, oh, you got to go see this. And I think this might have been the first movie that used the whole like we film the audience while they watch it and showed that in the. I could be wrong.
The first one did that.
That's what I'm saying.
The first movie. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And so the first movie kind of sort of was captured in the zeitgeist of everyone was word of mouth. You got to go see this, and it was a huge hit. It was made very cheaply and made tons of money. But the third movie is more of a prequel, and it takes place in the 80s, and it's just more malevolent stuff that happens with things we can't see. And I thought the series sort of peaked with how like the ingenuity of setting up scares in the movie. Like it peaked in this movie. There's a scene where the camera oscillates in the dining room and goes from the kitchen to the living room, and with each turn like something new happens and you don't know really like where things are going, and some of these shots go on for like minutes on end. There's a great sequence where one of the young girls in the movie plays Bloody Mary, or is it Bloody Mary?
Yes.
Yeah, in the bathroom, and things take a very sinister turn with that. This is one of the few movies of the decade that like truly like I had to turn lights on while watching, because it just I got so unsettled watching it. And then I like the ending is probably gonna upset a lot of people because it sort of adds this new twist into the story. But I really dug it because I sort of thought that it was done very well and sort of mysteriously. Like you're watching it, and I don't want to give it away in case people haven't seen it, but it sort of takes a whole new twist on what's happening throughout the entire series. And I thought the way that was revealed was very well done and sort of scared me more than what I'd seen previously within the movie and in the series in general.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. This is my favorite of the Paranormal Activity movies. It landed number 3 on our found footage countdown. Uh,
Damn.
so yeah, we both love this movie.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
And I watched it a year ago, and it still got me.
yeah, I think this next upcoming October, I think I'm gonna go through the Paranormal Activity movies because I haven't seen them in a very long time. 3 was probably the last one I watched because I like visiting that one the most. But yeah, again, where some movies would try to take the Bloody Mary sequence and try to make an entire film about that, this movie uses that sequence in a film of a bunch of other type of scares perfectly. You know, I could see Blumhouse trying to make a Bloody Mary movie right now
Yeah,
and
yeah.
making every scare about teenagers saying Bloody Mary into a mirror and someone making a spooky face. But this movie does the one scene and it does it perfectly, and it moves on to a different type of scare for the next scary moment.
Yep.
So that's what really stands out for me in this movie. Is that it just doesn't rely on the same scare each time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. So, yeah, I'm right there with you. I think it's the best of the Paranormal Activity movies. And obviously, we think it's one of the best found footage movies.
Yes, we do.
All right. So then number 4. This is where I think this is kind of where things were getting tricky in the countdown.
Yeah.
Because I know at this point I had 3 that I thought were must-haves on this list. And you had at this point you had said there is a definitive number 1.
Yes. With
Yes,
and I stand by that.
I do too. I think.
Although I do have some thoughts that I want to talk about in terms of that pick when we get there.
Okay. So then number 4, leave it up to me, the Fred head in the room, to bring up a Nightmare on Elm Street film, and my favorites, and I think it's the personal best of the series, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors.
Surprised you didn't sing it.
I did last time.
You did.
You only get it once, Blake.
Damn.
I will leave it up to Dawkins this time.
Okay.
Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors, directed by Chuck Russell. Craven coming back to give some story credits in this film. But this is about these group of high school kids that are brought into this mental hospital because all of them have seemingly tried to commit suicide or have had bad and terrible thoughts and are, mistreating their parents or have been brought there by their parents. All of this because of the man of their dreams, Freddy Krueger. And again, Robert Englund.
The man of their dreams.
That's
a very well eloquent put.
Yeah, this is, I think, what a sequel does perfectly is you take that original core concept that you come up with the original and you expand upon it. You make it bigger, you make it better.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie is the encapsulation of that. I think it's the Empire Strikes Back of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, if you will. We get to see the return of Heather Langenkamp this time as Nancy. She gets to kind of be the mentor, the leader of this group of students and kids. And what really stands out to me in this is that no matter who you are when you're watching it, there is at least one kid you're probably going to relate to, if not multiple kids. Yeah, I mean, I think the kid I probably related to the most was the kid in the wheelchair, Philip. No, not Philip. What was his name? Anyway, I can't remember. He was the kid in the wheelchair that liked the Dungeons and Dragons. And
is it Joey?
No, I think it was Will. As I'm looking, we're running out of male names on here.
We are running out of names, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely Will. Joey is the deaf kid. Yeah, I think he alongside Kincaid are the two that I relate to the most. Just because Kincaid at the end gives one of my favorite lines. Freddy, he's like, Freddy, come on, you motherfucker. Like, just he's like not afraid at that point, and I love that moment. And yeah, I mean, again, like I said, there's a kid for everybody to relate to. You get the great Larry Fishburne in this movie, and a very just small bit role in this movie. John Saxon returns, and it's always great to see John Saxon pop up in any movie that he's in. And this one has my favorite dream sequences in the entire film series, and I think this is where Freddy gets more of a personality, but he's not the Friday night stand-up comedian yet.
Yeah.
And my favorite kill of the film and of the series is the puppeteering scene with the character Philip and Freddy puppeteering him using the veins in his body. It's such a great image in the film.
Boy, I had a tough time watching that last year when I rewatched this. But yeah, this is probably like my second favorite of the sequels. I still like A New Nightmare, which I realize is probably not a full-on sequel to the series, which I think we debated a little bit about last time. But yeah, this is a very inspired movie. Like you said, it kind of took what it took the idea of expanding on an idea, and it took it to like maybe as far as it could go, and as big as it could have gone.
And like when people talk about, because especially lately people are like, let's get a Nightmare on Elm Street sequel, let's bring it back like we did Halloween, and the movie everybody refers to in that is we need a new Dream Warriors. That's kind of what everybody's been bringing up.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it'd be hard to capture that magic once again.
Yeah, I agree. It sort of like peaks with this movie for me.
Yeah, I think it's the best. I enjoy all the other ones after as well, but and this has a great killer soundtrack as well.
Yeah, special shout out to Craig Wasson, who plays a psychiatrist in the movie. I always dig when he shows up.
He's great in this movie.
Yeah, he is.
All right, so then number 3.
This is where maybe I chose I played a movie too high, probably.
You went with your heart on this one.
I really did. So I went with Rec 2, which is the sequel to the Spanish movie Rec, which came out I think a year or two prior. To explain Rec 2, I kind of have to explain what Rec is about. Rec is a found footage movie about a reporter in Madrid, Spain, who is doing a story on the overnight firemen in the city. During her one night she's there, they get called to a mysterious case in an apartment building. When they get there, they find out that it's maybe not what they were initially called there for. And it turns out that there is I know this movie is not widely seen, so I'm going to try and like dance around what the actual thing is. But essentially, they find themselves in the middle of a zombie outbreak. And while they are there, the police, the government show up. They quarantine the building. They cannot get out. They're locked inside. And they have to fight for their lives. And what I love about the movie is that it's incredibly scary and intense. And that's essentially what happens in Rec. And I'm leaving out what happens in the last 10 minutes because it's huge spoilers for what you're experiencing. But Rec 2 is a fascinating sequel because it essentially takes place at the same time as the first movie, just from a different point of view with different characters. And it sort of like mixes in events from the first one without sort of rehashing them. You kind of just get a different perspective. And I really loved that idea of a sequel doing that. And where the first movie is sort of like this gradual like build and then intense sequence and then build in another intense sequence. Rec 2 is just like a full-on roller coaster ride of scare, and then it ends. And it's just like this rare sequel that it at least equals what you get out of the first one, if not improved upon it. And I haven't seen this movie in a long time, so I can't really speak to the entirety of why I love it. but it deserves its place on this list. I probably played it too high. If anything, I probably should have flipped like Rec 2 was 28 Weeks Later, or maybe like Texas Chainsaw Man, or I'm sorry, Devil's Rejects. But it deserves to be here. It's a very, very solid sequel, and that my hopes for talking about it is just to get people to go see it, because the first Rec and Rec 2 are very, very good horror movies that just do not get talked about at all.
Yeah, I have heard you praise this movie since the beginning of this podcast, and I have not watched either
Yeah.
movies yet.
We should have like a double feature night where whenever this fucking virus ends, we should get together and watch a bunch of movies, but specifically these two back to back. They're just,
Yeah.
it's 3 hours of complete terror.
Yeah, no promises that I won't watch both before this is over. Especially since now
you got to do what you got to do.
Especially now that we've talked about it twice, I think I'm just gonna have
Yeah.
to pull the trigger on it. And
Yeah.
yes, this movie was on the first film was on a previous list, topping one of those lists. You can probably figure out which list we're talking about. Yeah, I don't have much to say on this because I have not seen either film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just echo that. I just strongly recommend people check this out.
All right, so that was number 3, Rec 2. So number 2, I think I threw you for a major loop when I announced this one.
You did, because I was not expecting this movie at all, and I'm sort of happy that it happened this way.
A movie that was brought up just a few weeks ago on our Universal Monsters episode. This is The Bride of Frankenstein. So The Bride of Frankenstein, 1935, the follow-up to the James Whale classic Frankenstein. Takes place immediately after the events of the first film, where both Dr. Henry Frankenstein and his monster both have survived the climax of the previous film. At this point, Henry Frankenstein is trying to rid this mad scientist ways about him. He just kind of wants to be a normal man. He wants to be a husband. He wants to be a good man to his wife. And the monster has gone out on his own in the wilderness and is still being hunted by the townspeople that know he is still alive out there. But basically how this film goes and everything wraps back into this is the character of Dr. Pretorius is introduced, which is a name later used in a Stuart Gordon film, From Beyond.
Yes, it is.
Yes. And so Dr. Pretorius is introduced, this very flamboyant mentor to Frankenstein, and he basically guilt trips him, and he is the mad scientist in this film and guilt trips Henry Frankenstein to come back and help him rejuvenate life, to bring new life, to create a mate for this monster that they have created. What really stands out for Bride of Frankenstein, again, like I mentioned with Dream Warriors, what makes a great sequel is you take those original ideas and they build upon them, expand upon them. And what really works here is that, Dr. Pretorius is obviously the antagonist of the film, but there is also moments where you feel very bad, and you can't help but root for both Henry Frankenstein and the monster this time, again played marvelously by Boris Karloff. And what really works for me in this movie is how much humanity is given to the monster in this film. And again, they're probably my favorite sequence of The Bride of Frankenstein, and maybe out of any Universal monster film, is where the monster comes upon this cottage and meets this blind man. So he has no idea what the monster looks like, and the blind man basically just believes that the monster cannot talk. And so the two find camaraderie that way because they both had this affliction towards them. And what really works is there is a great sequence where the blind man plays his violin and plays this great music, and this is the first time the monster has heard music in his entire life, and he just starts weeping endlessly. And it's such a great and powerful sequence in this film. And yeah, there's so many different undertones in the Bride of Frankenstein, and of course there's endless books and documentaries about all the undertones of this film, especially since director James Whale was an out gay man, and there is undertones of that. There's undertones of religion, creation, pretty much anything you could throw into a film and spark controversy was in The Bride of Frankenstein. And of course, I mean, I should bring up the bride in this movie. She's in the film for about 5 minutes, but yet leaves a everlasting impact and forever will be a just as iconic character as the monster.
Yeah, I have not seen this yet, and I'm in the same boat with you as the Rec series. Like you've now gushed about this movie on at least 2 other shows, and I just need to find time to sit down and watch them, and I can't wait to do that.
Yes, highly recommend. I'll recommend that entire Frankenstein series. That was a big player in our Universal Monsters episode. That entire Frankenstein
Yeah.
Universal movie. So yes, number 2, Bride of Frankenstein.
Whew. All right. So I was tasked with the number 1 pick on this list,
before you announce it, did you think it was going to be this hard, especially when we got to this number 1 when I played Bride at number 2?
It wasn't hard for me to play this. I knew I was going to play it the entire time. My only concern was whether you would play it before I did, or else you really wanted another movie on here and would veto it, and then I'd be forced to play it, which I'm fine. Would have been fine playing the other movie, but this to me was like the definitive sequel. So I wasn't concerned once we got to the number 1 spot. So,
so what is that number 1?
I am going with I went with George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, which for me, there's like 3 or 4 like unequivocal best of the genre: The Exorcist, Suspiria, and this one, Dawn of the Dead. It is one of the perfect horror movies ever made. Like I said earlier, where we can use the genre to make comments on society without being heavy-handed or using a hammer. The Dawn of the Dead is like the perfect movie to that makes criticisms on Reaganism before Reaganism came in, not communism. I'm sorry, consumerism, and it's just like this perfect movie about like not the aftermath of the events of the first movie, but more of like a different view of what's happening. And that is the question I wanted to ask you. I've been thinking about this. Is this technically a sequel?
Yes. I mean, as much as there is a connection between, especially the 3 original Romero movies, it's as much of a sequel as you would get to Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
So again, it's one of those things. It's like, well, technically, yes. I mean, it's very much inside the same universe and set in a later period of time.
But not much later.
No, I definitely think it would qualify as a sequel.
Yeah. So, Dawn of the Dead, for those of you for maybe the 3 people who have not seen this movie, so Night of the Living Dead takes place at like the beginning of this zombie outbreak, and Dawn of the Dead would be like maybe like that night or the next night where people are realizing what's happening. And what I love about Dawn of the Dead is it begins with such, I've used this word about 85 times tonight, but it begins with such intensity where people don't know what to do. They don't have the information to help them process what's happening. It starts off in a newsroom where a guy's explaining what's happening, and people are half, trying to do their job, and the other half are trying to figure out how they're going to survive. This couple gets a helicopter and pick up their friend who's a SWAT team member, and his buddy comes along, and they escape to a mall in the middle of nowhere where they take refuge and sort of create like this this utopia, or at least what they can call a utopia, without zombies, without having to fight the zombie apocalypse every day. And of course, it takes them a while to get there. They have to clean out the mall, but once they get there, they finally have everything they need. They're able to have a sustainable life. Well, at least what they can without venturing outside. And all of that comes crashing down when a biker gang comes and realizes that they want in on it too. But this is just, for me, it's the best zombie movie ever made. It's just one of the best horror movies ever made. It sort of shows the fear that we have of not just zombies, but of other people when the chips are down. And this is just it for me. This is one of the best movies ever made.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think what makes horror so important, and one of the reasons I love horror movies so much, besides, I mean, I think you feel the same way. Of course, we love the blood and guts and all that. That's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the transgressive nature of horror movies that I don't get with other genres.
Yeah, but I don't know about you, but I love when horror movies can take, you get all the blood and the guts and the gore and the great special effects, but the underlying themes underneath it are far more important in these movies. And I think that's a genre that only horror can do, really. Like, when I think of it, only horror can introduce, like, when you think of horror, things that scare you and terrify you, but then also having a political statement underneath.
Mm-hmm.
Think any other genres that can bring in what makes it so strong and powerful like that, but also give out a very strong and equally as powerful message during it.
This is one of the best at it.
And this, like, I think this probably is the best at it. When you think of horror movies with political commentary and social commentary, like, this is probably the first movie that comes to your mind in that category, Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
And I mean, we mentioned it when we recorded this previously. I'm right there with you. This is the greatest zombie movie ever made, and I don't think anything really comes close to it.
Yeah, well, I think there are some that do, but
there are very good ones out there.
I would place this at the top, and I think Night of the Living Dead is a fantastic movie, and we obviously would not have Dawn of the Dead if it wasn't for that movie. But I think this takes the idea of what you get in the first one and just kind of like amplifies that for a different audience. You know, it's like almost 10 years later the movie came out, and to a different time too.
One thing that I did between us recording the episodes here, I went back and listened to a previous episode you and I were on the Backlot Main Show. We talked about zombie movies.
Okay.
And we, from that episode, basically you, me, and Brian, we all came up with a top 5 list, our personal top 5s. You and I both had the same number 1, Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
So I went back and listened to that after this because I'm like, man, I'm pretty sure we both had that at number 1, and sure enough, we did. So that's.
I sort of credit this movie with like one of the, like, I always loved horror movies. I always loved being scared, but like I saw this when I was like 16, 17, and this was the movie that sort of brought me in. This and Suspiria were the movies that brought me into the genre, and we're just like, this is your home. Like, this is where you belong. And I watch this every like 2 or 3 years, and it just holds up for me. It's as the kids would say, it's a banger.
It's a banger. It slaps. Dawn of the Dead slaps. I'm right there with you. This is one of the first films that I wrote down on my list, and I figured it was going to come up at some point as well on this. So, that's number 1, Dawn of the Dead. I'll run through the list one more time, and then, of course, we'll talk about the boomstick in the room.
Yeah.
All right. So our top 12 horror sequels of all time according to the Killer Countdown, hosted by myself, Casey, and Blake. Number 12, Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. Number 11, Scream 4. Number 10, Doctor Sleep. Number 9, The Devil's Rejects. Number 8, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Number 7, 28 Weeks Later. Number 6, The Exorcist 3. Number 5, Paranormal Activity 3. Number 4, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. Number 3, Rec 2. Number 2, The Bride of Frankenstein. And the number 1 greatest horror sequel of all time, George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. So Evil Dead 2 did not make the list. What the hell were we doing?
Well, that comes down to us being maybe, I don't know, a little selfish at 2, 3, and 2, maybe. I don't know.
No, I think it came down to we played things, I think, towards the top that were like, well, yeah, Evil Dead's better than those. And it came down to, man, we're running out of room really fast.
Yeah. I think, I don't think our love for Evil Dead 2 should, be missed here. Like, we both love Evil Dead 2 and
I mean, it's top 10 horror of all time for me.
Yeah, it's the first Blu-ray I ever bought. Period. For me, it's like, and for me, it's number 2, and that's actually what I expected to be played at number 2. So when you played Bride of Frankenstein, in my head, I was like, oh, well, Evil Dead 2 is not making this list now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like I said, just because it's not here doesn't mean we don't love it and don't think it deserves to be here. It's just like these lists that we curate, and where we don't convene beforehand to discuss what's going to happen. This is what happens when we do not plan this list.
Yeah, going into it, I was thinking, I'm like, all right, Evil Dead, we're probably going to get to top 5 for sure for Evil Dead 2, and it'll slip in there. And man, it's just the way the cookie crumbles. I mean, am I sad it didn't make it? Yeah, but that disappointed. Everybody's seen Evil Dead 2, which I was okay with.
Right.
I think
Evil Dead 2 doesn't need a push to be seen.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have some other good recommendations in there and as well. And yeah, do you want to throw out like 1 or 2 honorable mentions really quick that you had that maybe would have been played?
One that you had brought up that I completely forgot about, a sequel that I love, is Bride of Reanimator, which, as I said earlier, I'm not the biggest fan of Reanimator, but Bride of Reanimator like really sealed the deal for me, especially that final 20 minutes. I love Phantasm 2, and I think it's better than the first one. One of the few movies I've seen where I feel like I'm actually experiencing the apocalypse. And Hellbound Hellraiser 2, which I also like better than the original. I still love the original, don't get me wrong. Hellraiser 2, an incredibly brutal sequel, and particularly one sequence where people do not have skin they're walking around. And it has the great, fantastic line from Pinhead where it says, "Even in hell, your suffering will be legendary." Man, what a brutal thing to say to somebody. I love Hellbound Hellraiser 2.
Some of mine, I had Hellraiser 3 would have been my Hellraiser of choice.
Yeah, great.
Funnily enough, the Hellraiser movies, I like 3, then 2, then 1. I've not seen anything after that.
Oh, 4 is great too.
I've heard 4 is fun.
Bloodline's awesome.
Some of my honorable mentions that I'll throw out there very quick. A possible contender for maybe number 12, just because I love this movie and no one else does. I think you do too. Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows.
I don't love it, but I think if it wasn't tied to the first movie, it's standing alone by itself. It's a very solid movie.
Yeah, funnily enough, I hated it the first time I watched it because Blair Witch obviously is one of my top 5 favorite horror movies of all time. And going into it, it was not what I was expecting, but in subsequent rewatches of it, I'm like, okay, I get it, and I know what they're going for. Still, right. I want to see a director's cut Blu-ray out there. A couple other ones I'll throw out there. Insidious 2 was another modern one that I thought was really great and a very good companion piece to the first Insidious. And then if I was going to throw a Halloween movie on there, one of my other favorite franchises, I would have thrown out Halloween H2O. I think is the strongest of the direct sequels to the original Halloween. Halloween 3, much like New Nightmare, I wouldn't count as a sequel, even though it does hold the title Halloween 3.
Yeah, I love Halloween 3, and I would have played it top 5 for sure. But I made a rule for myself that um, I would only play movies that sort of advance the story, or at least take place in like the universe of the original movie. And while I adore Halloween 3, it didn't make sense to play it because it's not technically a sequel, even though it's namesake of the original. So.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. If you would have played it, I would not have stabbed it, gotten rid of it at all. I would have totally allowed it.
Yeah.
All right, should we wrap this thing up then? Wrap up our second time recording this.
Let's call it.
All right. Before we lose it all again, you can find this podcast and all the other Backlot 605 podcasts and any previous episodes of the Killer Countdown on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcast, and YouTube. Please follow Backlot 605 on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. While you're on there, please give us some recommendations of some Killer Countdown lists that you'd like to see us do. I mean, we're pretty much an open book after next week. We don't have after next episode, we don't have anything else planned. So if you want to throw out a recommendation there, we would love to hear it. You can also check out the South Dakota Film Community Group page if you're listening from South Dakota. Please join us there. Please join the conversations that we've been having on there. And yeah, Blake, where can people find you online?
Well, I have an Instagram account where I only review movies. It's Midwest_cinephile. I am sort of just cherry picking movies that I really want to talk about. But I write about, I try to stay within 3 to 4 paragraphs of a review, and I just give my thoughts on what I saw or what I watched. And yeah, Midwest_cinephile on Instagram.
You can find me on Instagram, Casey_the horror guy. I am reviewing every single horror movie I watch. I didn't take on the very hard task that you took on, Blake, of trying to review everything because I knew that was just not going to happen.
Yeah, and which is why I scaled back to cherry picking what I wanted to review, because I just cannot. I don't have that mindset to just review a movie right after I watch it, and that's generally when I should, because I'm a procrastinator. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah, and one more thing, you can find a Backlot 605 on backlot605.com for our latest movie news, reviews, discussions, articles there. Check out our upcoming reviews of the Cursed Films documentary. We're going to have a few of those reviews up on the website, and go check out that series. Streaming right now on Shudder. All right, do I need to throw anything else out there? Are we missing anything that we brought up last time that we should bring up this time?
I don't think so, unless you want to tease the next episode.
Oh, yeah, we can do that. So the next episode that we will be doing, and I've been going through his filmography, both the good and the bad, is one of Blake's favorite directors, Mr. Timothy Bartholomew Burton.
Yes,
I don't think that's his middle name, but
yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited here. And listen, I am not the world's biggest Tim Burton fan. That's known, but I'm looking forward to you and your fiance talking about someone that they like and care about, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, good thing, since you are not the biggest Tim Burton fan, good thing we're bringing on Kayla, who is the biggest Tim Burton fan.
Yes, they share the same birthday, right?
Share the same birthday. That's it was simply meant to be.
Yes.
If you catch that reference to a Tim Burton property, then good on you.
I did not. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. I'm excited for this. I got to watch a few movies that I had never seen before. I tried to. We can talk about it next time more, but I'm trying to go through them all, even the ones I have seen, and I'm like, I can't go back to Planet of the Apes and Alice in Wonderland. I just can't do it. So Spoiler alert, those will not be played by myself. But I don't know if Kayla will play those. I don't know.
I'm super stoked to see what she plays.
Yeah.
Because I have like my unequivocal top like 3 or 4 Burton movies that I really enjoy. There's one that I absolutely love, and I hope I hope it just makes the list. That's all I care about. So
Yeah, so we'll be doing a top 8 list. I have a definitive number 1, and Blake, I'm gonna throw it off to you for the trivia question for then. So if you can come up with a Tim Burton themed trivia question, that would be awesome to decide that order.
I will do my best.
And please let me have the number 1.
Well, that's not my choice. So.
Otherwise, I am scared of what will be played at number 1.
You know, I definitely hope there's wrenches thrown. And now that you say that, I hope there's a wrench thrown at number 1, just to spite you.
Yeah, I would not put it past her. So yeah, that'll be our next episode. Tim Burton films. We're looking forward to that. But Blake, any other final thoughts?
No, man. No.
All right, I will sign off here. Blake, I'm going to throw it off to you to give your fancy sign off that you had last time that I dug.
All right, Casey. Until next time, spook you later.